Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the Bedford Cable Network, and we're going to have some fun today. We are joined by Michael Rock of Fun 107, the morning show host at Fun 107. You've got another title here. I want to make sure, Director of Content.
Yeah, that's like my real job.
That's the real job.
Yeah. At
Fun 107 and WBSM. So basically, he's like the guru of WBSM and Fun 107.
I don't know about guru, but
does his yoga. He's like Yoda.
No, just like I oversee all the product of
Exactly.
Fun 107 WBSM. So that's on air, online. We used to do events, not right now, but things like that.
And most people know you as the guy who wakes them up in the morning. Hopefully you're there on time, because if not, their days are all messed up.
Yeah, no, always get there on time. I get there, the show starts at 5:30, and everybody asks me this, what time do you get to work?
That's a big, yeah.
So I get to work, the show starts at 5:30, I get there about 5:29 and 30 seconds. Truly. But my work day begins much earlier than that. I do a lot of my prep work at home. And that starts at like 3:30.
And in fairness, Michael and I have known each other for about 30 years right now, actually, from working at the radio station, whatever. So it's good to see him. And a lot of fun today. I wanted to talk just about radio, just about music, lots of things happening in the industry and what have you. We were talking off air about some stuff, but you've been doing radio for a long time.
Almost 30 years.
Almost.
So my first day on the radio ever was at Syracuse University. It was October 2nd, 1991, and I know that because that was my 18th birthday. And so that was the first, and my show aired from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m.
Always like that for your college kid. Your first gig is always in the middle of the night.
And it was bad. Really, really bad. So I have the tapes. I should have brought them. I have these terrible tapes.
That's funny.
Of me trying to play radio DJ and being Mr. Tryhard, and it's just.
But you knew you wanted to do this
a long time
before that.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, I wanted to do this when I was like 12 years old. I would listen to Casey Kasem.
Who didn't?
Who used to do the weekly Top 40 countdown, the American Top 40 actually, the American Top 40, and I would listen to Casey Kasem count down the songs. I would keep track of what the number one song was. I mean, it was just inside me, and I would listen to him do his thing, record it, rewind it, and then try to mimic what he was doing.
Yeah.
And I just happened to live in a town, it was Tewksbury, of a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame DJ, Dale Dorman, and he was on Kiss 108 in Boston, and he had heard about me as far as my interest in radio, and I don't think there are a lot of kids who are. Right. It's kind of like a calling.
And for those who remember Dale Dorman too, and I'll actually age myself because he was on WRKO when they were the rock station and stuff like that.
And he was on Channel 56 as Uncle Dale.
Yeah.
He'd tell you to keep the TV down so mom and dad could sleep.
I mean, he was a legendary broadcaster.
Absolutely. Complete and total legend. And he was an inspiration to me as a young broadcaster because Dale did not have the signature big booming radio voice like I don't. So when I saw the success that Dale Dorman had, I mean, and like I said, he's like a legend, like you said, a legend and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame disc jockey. So to see somebody like that succeed in broadcasting was really inspirational to me because I knew I didn't have that big voice.
Personality though. I mean,
personality, it's all about that.
Personality off the radio.
Yes.
For so long,
Mm-hmm.
and you think of his career, and you look at your own career, you're talking decades.
He was always larger than life, and he's passed away since. But when I interned for him, I ended up getting my career started there at KISS, and I interned for Dale, who did the afternoon show there. And I remember the first time I was there interning, and I heard him in the hall, down this long hall, and I heard his voice. I was like, wow, he really does sound like that off the air. I couldn't believe it. And, having conversations with him, and I learned so much from him. He probably doesn't even know how much I learned from him just by watching him and seeing what he did. And then after I was done, and he was the one that encouraged me to go to Syracuse University because that's where he grew up. And
He was reviewing your tapes, though.
He was. So that's the thing. So when
I remember you telling me that.
He did that well into my career.
I was going to say, even when you were at Fun 107, you were still shipping him off tapes.
Definitely, because he'd want them. He would actually like care enough to be like, "How's it going? You know, I want to hear what you sound like." And I'd send him the tapes, and he would write long critiques about them, and they weren't like hurtful. They were, they were like the compliment sandwiches. You sounded really great here. Here you went a little too long on that. You lost me. It was boring. And I just don't know. It's just such a kind thing to do, to take time out of your career. Obviously, he's a busy guy.
Right.
Just helping someone else develop their skill. And so that really changed me as far as when, I became a little more established. It was very important to me to have an internship program at Fun 107. So we still do, even to this day. We're going to be welcoming back our Greater New Bedford Vogue Tech interns next week. And because if somebody has a spark like that for broadcasting, I think it's your responsibility to nurture it. Maybe it's your responsibility, no matter what field you're in, to nurture that in young people, so that you give back to the young the way somebody did that for you.
It's interesting when you think back to the early 90s music, and talk to me in a sense about personalities. You knew, and you and I were talking about it off camera on the phone a week ago or so. I mean, you had Dale Dorman, you had Maddie, who's still there in the morning at Kiss One Way, but BCN had larger than life DJs. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the same anymore. In general at radio, do you think it is, or?
Well, I mean,
you're established, but I think it's sometimes you're rare now.
Oh yeah, no, I'm definitely the exception, not the rule. I think usually, I've been very lucky where I've set up shop in a market and stayed there, where I think radio in general is more of a vagabond profession.
Yeah.
So it's, don't get too tied up into a place, because you're going to end up in Cincinnati somewhere, And when I was young, before I met my wife, I was definitely ready for that. I was ready. I used to say, if I could ever get to a market that had a Major League Baseball team, I'd be so happy, because then I would know that I made it. But I did end up getting back to Boston, but I realized very quickly that I really liked it here at Fun 107, because they'd let me get involved in everything. And when I was in Boston, I was working on the morning show there, and they would be like, I'd be like, "Oh, we should be doing this, or we should be doing that," and they'd be like, "Yeah, just go do the morning show." And they weren't mean about it, but it was just like everybody had a role, and my role was to do the morning show. And there were people that were paid well to think about contests, and people were, paid well to come up with, something we should be doing. And that's just not what I was doing. And so everyone had a role, and some people would say that's a much better way to do it, a much more efficient way to do it. But that's not the way I like to do it. I like to just get involved in every part of the radio station. I just love everything about it.
A lot of stations don't have the full-time DJs and what have you anymore.
Sure.
It's and I guess looking at the personalities.
Well, I think that's why, that's why you see this deficiency for those big personalities now, because most radio companies these days they'll be the big radio DJ in New York City, and they'll take that morning show and they'll pipe it into Miami and Detroit and Charlotte, and that's really great, because that New York City DJ is probably one of the best DJs in the whole country, and I don't think anybody would argue that. But what do I care about this guy that's in New York if I'm waking up in Charlotte, or if I'm waking up in Dartmouth, Mass?
Right.
You just don't. You know what I mean? It's just it's a lost connection. This morning, we're talking about New Bedford, Fall River, Fairhaven things. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I always say, the best Fun 107 topics are ones that could never air on any other station in the country. And I think that's why Fun 107 has done well, and that's why we still have that full stable of hosts.
Well, the technology's changed too because you have the app, and so you can be heard
Anywhere.
Podcast. Yeah, you can be heard anywhere in the world. But I think, to me, the magic of radio is what you just said. Is like the hosts of any station talks about issues that are specific to them, and
That's when you bond with the audience,
right?
Because
they know what you're talking about,
right? And they do, and they can visualize it. So if I'm saying that, I was eating under the new tent out in front of the end zone, everybody that just heard me say that, you can actually see in your head, because you've probably driven by and saw the white tent out in front of the end zone, and they know what it's like there.
Right.
So now, like, my story there's another layer to the story that they can just feel connected to that. And they know you're connected to the community. They know that you're eating at the same restaurants they eat at and shopping at the same stores that they shop at.
So there's less jobs too then, really, when you think about it.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that's what's happened, is that the farm teams,
that's a good way of describing it, actually.
they're gone.
Yeah.
So like when I was coming up, I had that 2 to 4 a.m. show, and that's gone. So like that talent isn't being developed at a time when nobody's listening. So that hurts the industry. You know what I mean? So that and I'm talking industry wide here, not
Correct.
so much Fun 107.
Yeah, exactly.
We're very
No.
lucky here, but
Right.
I think that's why you don't see those big personalities in each market.
Do you find that kids, and think back to the 18-year-old or whatever, do you find that kids want to do this job anymore?
They do. It's changed a lot. You know what I mean? So when we bring in kids to Fun 107, I'm teaching them about radio, but I'm also teaching and spending a lot of time on social media and how social media works and how digital media works, because that, if we're going to be honest about it, that is going to be really where the opportunities are going to be for them long term.
Right.
So here's what I've learned over the past 5 years, I'll say, is that you can't get hung up about how you're consuming this stuff. Don't worry about that. Just create great content, and sure, put it on the radio, and put it on your social media, and put it on fun107.com, and put it on in all these different places. As long as it's good content, you're going to be fine, and you're going to get paid. I mean, you see that with 18-year-olds on YouTube.
Yeah.
As long as you're coming up with good content and you put that on TikTok, you're going to get paid. So just be a content creator. I'm not a radio guy anymore. I'm a content creator.
Is that I don't want to say frustrating to you, but is that no?
No, it's fun.
Yeah.
Because back before all this, the show ends at 10 o'clock, and you hang up your headphones and you go home or whatever, and something might happen. They're like, oh man, like that would have been great for the show. Well, that's fine. You can go put it on right now.
Right.
And there are so many things, like the technology of the app. There are so many things that allow us to be more interactive than we ever have before. Where, for example, we're doing this contest right now, $10,000 cash code.
Yep.
So we have people like using the app and using their voice to tell us how they would spend the $10,000, and the quality of that audio is like what you're hearing right now.
Correct. Yeah.
Not a phone. And so that's like audio that you can use so many different ways. It's just, there are so many more tools in the toolbox now. There's no drawback on it.
We were talking, and I made a statement to you, which I thought was and you responded interesting to me in that I said it must be hard to keep, as technology changes, the older listener, as the listeners get older, and you said just the opposite.
It's just the opposite.
And I found that interesting because...
So I've got the listeners that were there when I started, they're still there.
And they were listening to the radio.
They're
For the
listening
most
to the
part.
radio, sure.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're listening on the app too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I saw a stat that 90 million American households now have a smart speaker, an Alexa or Google, whatever. So And if you think about your home, I bet you don't have a radio in your home.
No, see,
Do you?
I'm the opposite, but okay.
It's okay. But a lot of people don't have a radio, like an actual radio in their house. So like, your alarm clock.
I'll make you feel good.
Yeah.
We have the radio in the kitchen, which Fun 107 is one of the program station.
Good.
I have my radio upstairs, and you know me well enough. I'll have VSM on.
Yeah, yeah.
And Kim wakes up to Fun 107 and won't on her alarm clock.
See, I'm not worried. So the fact that they don't have their radio in the house is okay, because I know that they're listening on the phone or their smart speaker. Like, they're still there, and that's the important thing. I don't care how they're listening.
Right.
I just want them to listen.
Right.
And so, like you said, maybe somebody, here's an improvement. Somebody might have a commute up to Boston, where if this was 1995 and I'm doing the morning show, I'm going to lose them once they get to Brockton or the split, the 128 split.
Yeah.
So, but now they can listen all the way up.
Yep.
And park car in the parking garage and pay their $1,000 a month for parking it there, and then go in. So they can listen on the app.
I think it's funny too, and just as a sidebar, when I look at my kids, especially the older ones, Hannah and Abby, they've listened to you pretty much their whole life. And that's got to be
weird.
A funny feeling to hear that. They're 24 and 22, but it's kind of like you were talking about Casey. We listen to him, or in Rick Dees, for example.
Still doing it.
I still listen to the countdown every weekend. Not all the way through, but kind of like you were saying, like, I always want to know what's number one.
No, so having adults come up to you and say, I've been listening to you my entire life, 25% the worst thing in the world to ever hear, 75% the best. Like,
Yeah.
it's 25% of you dies a little bit when you see a grown woman or a grown man come up to you and say, I've been listening to you my whole life. Are you kidding me? How could that be? But then, honestly, it's a compliment. It's one of the best compliments you can give me.
We got about 10 minutes left, but I wanted to talk about music. Fun 107 is hit radio, top 40 radio. But top 40 radio has changed the music has changed, I guess.
Music's constantly changing.
From
constantly.
what I listened to as a kid versus what's being played now. And the way and you were telling me off air, which was interesting, they don't do, artists don't do albums. Like, we used to wait.
They do them.
Right.
They still do albums.
But you don't go to the store and get the vinyl or the CD or anything like that.
Not so much. But, like Taylor released an album over quarantine.
I know about that, yeah.
Yeah, so the album is definitely still part of the listener experience, especially for those super fans like, Taylor's Army. But, no, there are still albums, but what has changed is the way the music is released.
Right.
So, it would be, in the old days, 15, 20 years ago, you would have, let's say, Justin Bieber, if you were around back then, he would come up with an album, and then they'd release a song from it, and they would take its run on radio, and then they'd release another one, it would take its run on radio. And then if he was lucky enough to get a third one, great. And then we go on tour, and then we take a year off, and we're writing for another album, and repeat.
Yep.
And that just isn't the way it works anymore. It's, again, back to just make great content. So these artists will go and they'll come up with a song. And 9 times out of 10, that song is a collab with another person. And so then now it's Justin Bieber featuring Ariana. And they release that one song. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a part of a bigger project, a bigger album. And then before you know it, they can release 2 more songs. Again, no album.
Right.
They're just working on content and releasing it, because why not? They're younger, they don't know or care about these other things.
Do you think that, going back to your Casey case or Rick Dees, do you think that the countdown matters, or the people care about what's number one, or
like the audience?
Well, not just the audience, but the artist too. Is it?
Oh, yes.
It is a big deal.
Oh my goodness.
Because
yes.
the way the music's distributed, is it?
Listen, it is a big deal.
Is it? Okay.
Oh yeah. There is an enormous amount of pressure. For example, Taylor Swift with her song that was out, Cardigan.
Cardigan, yep.
It
dropped big last week. I know that. Abby was a little upset.
That was that's a song. It's a lot different than, some of the stuff that she's done recently. It's a little more folky. But that doesn't mean Taylor Swift is one who personally gets involved to make sure that her songs get the best chance they can get. And there's a lot of expectations that each one of those releases will hit number one.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, there are problems.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't
like,
know.
meaning, the flip side is, when it does hit number one, and I've never heard of another artist that does this, but so like I have a contact with her record company, and that contact works to get her songs played on all the radio stations in New England.
Yep.
Okay. The first time that she hit number one at pop radio, she got a FedEx. The person who is her representative for this area, she got a FedEx, and she kind of threw it on the counter because there's a lot of that stuff in that industry, with things getting shipped FedEx. So it's not a particularly special thing. Opened it up that night after work, and it was a $1,000 check made out directly to her from Taylor Swift.
Wow.
Just saying thank you for helping me get to number one. And that's, so yes, it really does matter.
On the other side, you touched on it briefly. The audience, do they care?
I don't think so.
No?
I don't know. I don't know if they really care. I just think I like this song, or I don't like this song. I think that's really. I don't think that they think about radio as much as I'd like to think they do. I think
it's funny because I still think of the countdown like you do. I mean, I always listen to Casey.
Yeah.
What is number? Did my favorite song get it? Oh, I hate this song.
Yeah.
Why is this song number one?
Yep.
But the music has changed when you look at the countdowns too. It's more, I think back to the early '80s when you listen to it. You could have a country song on the top 40,
Yeah.
or a hard rock song on the top 40. It's not like that anymore.
It happens. It happens. There's a couple of country sounding songs right now in the top 40. Taylor Swift back in, before she went totally pop, was an example of that. But, I think top 40 is at its best when it's not dominated by one particular genre. You see, like, hip hop really get hot and really dominate for a period of time, or, a rockier type of sound get hot, let's even like Maroon 5 or something. I think it's best when it's really a cross section of it all.
Oh, I
That's
agree.
really then you're getting the best of best for each genre.
Right.
And that's really what Fun 107 is all about. It's taking the best of all these different types of music, the most popular music in the country, and putting it on.
What do you listen to? You listen to music all day, but if Michael Rock just wants to chill out, you and Cindy are on the porch just listening to music, what do you listen to?
I like most people like the music that they grew up listening to. So whatever the most influential years of someone's musical taste is like their high school years, college years. Mm-hmm. And then they tend to, after you get out of college and get into the work world or whatever, you tend to care less and less about current music. You get stuck in those influential years. So I'm no different than anybody else. I like 80s music because I fell in love with radio during that time. So I really do like that type of music. But I also like 90s music very much, and 90s hip hop in particular. 80s and 90s hip hop. I'd say, old school stuff.
What artist impresses you right now?
Now?
When you look at the artists, and again, I know you listen to hundreds of hours of music, but is there stuff that you like, and it's funny, like Louis Capaldi's, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
I love his song.
Sure.
Right now that's on the countdown.
Yeah.
That you play, that's heavy rotation. It's a great song. But I don't know a lot of the artists, but are there some that really impress you right now that they span generations, like old people or younger people? They have it. I mean, Taylor Swift is obvious.
I was going to say, I hate to bring her name up again, but she really impresses me in a big way. What I really like about her is that she's the artist, but and she's done this the whole time, she is in charge of everything. like from the business side of things to the production side of things. We're going to have this size stage. We're going to have these size monitors. No, we're not going to go there with those light up bracelets. Like she makes all these decisions, and she's pulling down 50, 60 million a year. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I really admire that. But as far as like just music, I got to say somebody that really has impressed me in 2020 is Justin Bieber. He's got a new song out called Holy, and it's definitely the most mature song he's ever put out. Then there's another song that I really can't talk about specifically. I've heard it before anybody else has, but it is a song that he sings that you're going to hear, and maybe it'll be out by the time this airs. But it's a very personal song that I think is not only his audience is going to like, but I think it's just an interesting song that there will be mass appeal that people will enjoy.
And it's hard for an artist, and you've probably talked with artists about this, it's hard for an artist to stay relevant.
Big time. That's
for
very
such
hard.
A long period of time.
Yes.
Taylor Swift is 30.
Yes. And
she's been doing this for 12 years or so? That she's been
a
pretty big star.
Since she's like maybe 16 or 17 on the country side of things.
I mean, I laugh because, and you would appreciate this, but Springsteen's song that came out, I think last week, Ghost. Great tune. And I mean, and he's still putting out music that, I mean, it's not going to be on top 40, but people still listen to it. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's hard to be relevant for such a long period of time.
It's hard to be relevant once. Never mind over and over again.
Yeah. That's funny that you said that. I mean, I think there's a lot of musicians that I don't know my kids like. And it's funny when you listen, and you've got the two kids, to hear what they're listening to, and you're like,
Yeah, it is. But that is just like every generation before us, and it will be every generation. When our kids are adults, they're not going to like their kids' music. Just the way it is.
Yeah. Although the funny thing is my kids too, they listen to fun, but they listen to country music too. Mm-hmm. I'm like, where the hell did that come from? Kim and I don't listen to that.
Massive artists in the country format. It kind of fluctuates back and forth, but the country's changed a lot. It's a much more top 40 sound.
That's what I was just going to say. It sounds more popish. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, when I grew up, it was Johnny Cash.
Twangy and boring and something your grandfather listened to.
It's definitely more, for lack of a better word, rocking or popish or something. So you can actually hear, or I can, that they're crossed a little bit. There's a little cross section between that.
Yeah, and I think there's always been that to some extent. When you think back in the 80s, as Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton and things like that. But no, I mean, that definitely, the sound of it has changed in a big way.
I could talk to you forever because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But thanks for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
It's so good seeing you. And then like I said, I'd love to get the whole morning team when.
Yeah, I was disappointed that we couldn't bring in Maddie and Gazelle because of the whole 6-foot thing. But
give Gazelle a hard time for me.
I will.
He's a good guy. And I haven't met Maddie, but I'm looking forward to meeting him.
And I hope I didn't block you too much. They were telling me, stop blocking his face. So I hope I didn't do that too many times.
Thanks for coming in.
You
Good
bet.
seeing you.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.